Hi, welcome to the next video in this section. We're going to talk about graphing in the XY plane. So what I have on the screen already is a relation of ordered pairs. One thing I wanted to point out with relations is that we can have repeated elements in the first or second coordinates. So notice here the domain is -3, -2, 0, 2, and then there's another copy of 2. So let's see, domain, and we'll have -3, -2, 0, and 2. And notice that I have a 2 here and a 2 here. But notice I don't write 2 twice. I just write both the positive and negative versions of 2. And so notice that repeated elements don't get repeated. And that's something I didn't say in the last video that I just wanted to quickly point out. And then the range, then we just look at the second coordinates, and this will be -4, 0, 1, 3, and -2 from the second coordinates. And this is always a good idea whenever you're seeing a relation. And later when we talk about functions, you always should look at particularly what is the domain. Range is not always easiest to figure out, but domain it definitely is. So that's one of the things you should always look for. Now, we want to graph this, and the graphing is something you should be familiar with before this course, but let's remind you how to do this. Now, one of the nice things here with graphing on the computer here is I can just immediately insert a grid in. And so let me copy this part right here. I don't know, let me see. I'm going to have to hook in my keyboard for a second, so bear with me. I'm going to just recopy this part right here and put it down here so we can see what we're working with. And now that we got that copied and pasted down there, I want to get the domain and range out of the way here. And so we're going to talk about how to graph these. So the first thing we need to do is draw the X and Y axes. So I'm going to draw on here. So that's the nice thing about using the grid is we can draw on the grid and make at least some decent graphs. And so in this direction is going to be the X direction. So I always label the direction of positive numbers, or numbers that go through positive affinity, and then this is Y, and the Y-axis, which this is the positive direction here. You can put arrows at the other ends, it doesn't matter. You don't have to put the affinity signs in either. I'm just emphasizing why I only put the arrows on the one side. Now let's look at our first coordinate, -3, 4. Now the other thing I'm going to ask you to do, which is very important, is put a scale on here. I will mark you off if I cannot tell what the scale is. And so in this case, I'm going to make each square here 1. So I'm going to label that as 1, and I'll label that as 1, and a simple little reminder like that is all I need for scale. And everything else you can leave unlabeled. Note that your scale doesn't have to be the same. For example, this could be, if it'll erase, a 2, and this could be a 3. But notice that when we scale things like this, then they start looking distorted. So usually I try to keep the same scale unless there's some reason to do this. Now, to graph -3, 4, we always start counting where the two lines cross. This is a special point, 0, 0, and this is called the origin. And basically the origin is basically you want to think about ordered pairs as how far you're traveling in which direction. So the first coordinate here is -3. So that means I am going to go 3 in the negative direction. So we're going to start here. Let's do a different color here. So we'll do this one in green here. So we're going to do this in green. And so we're going to go 1, 2, 3 in this direction. So here's where -3 is. Now let's not color it in so much. We're going to go -3 in that direction. And then the second part here says go down 4. So we're going to go down 4 squares. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And this point right here that I end up at, which we're going to label with a dot, So let's get rid of the travel paths and get my x-axis back in. This point I ended up at by going 3 right and 4 down. It's called -3, -4. So let's do that with the other ones. Let's choose a light blue, since dark blue probably won't work well with black. So we'll have -2, 0, and then it says goes -2 in the 0, or -2 in the x direction. So we start out the origin, we go out 2 in this direction. But then it says go 0 in the y direction. So that means we just stay on the x-axis. So this point right here, I'm going to delete this part here, is the point -2, 0. So notice that whenever the y-coordinate is 0, we are going to actually remain on the x-axis. Our next coordinate does a similar thing, so let's do this in red. And this will be 0, 1. And what that says is you go 0 in the x direction, so you do not move left or right on the x-axis, but you do go up 1. So we'll just actually go up 1, and we'll end up right here. And so in this case, that point is 0, 1. And then we just do the other 2 points similarly. Well, let's try out dark blue. See if it actually works. So -2, 3. So, or sorry, that's not a -2. That is, if we erase that, a +2, 3. So we're going to go 2 in the x direction, and we're going to go 3. Not recognizing my palm, sorry. In the y direction, and we're going to end up at this point here. I'll get rid of all the extra stuff, and this point here is 2, 3. And then finally, our last point, let's try orange. I saw an orange in here. So now we want to go to 2, -2, so we're going to go 2 again in the x direction, and we're going to go down 2 in the y direction. And that gets us to that point, so let's erase all the extra stuff. And this gives us the point 2, -2. So this is usually how your graph would look like. It'll just be a bunch of points. Another way you can show scale is just by labeling points. So if you didn't put the 1 here and the 1 here, you can show me scale by just labeling where your points are. Just note that without this type of scale, there's some bit of interpretation here. So I always try to be very generous, but if it's obviously wrong, I will mark it wrong. But this, usually if you give me a scale, usually things work out fine in the favor of the student. And then let's just take away the graph paper, and let's just go back to normal. And there is our graph sitting in 2-dimensional space here. So that's how you plot things on the XY plane. Our next video is now going to talk about tables and equations, and we're going to actually look at graphing entire equations on the XY plane. So see you then.